for discussion. We are almost there, so I'm going to start the recording now, and we can start discussing. It's 12.
Yeah, sure.
Happy learning, everyone.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. Welcome to the session, the podcast on open source technology, adaptation and implementation in pharma industry. Myself, Parag Shiralkar. I am founder and president of Sumptuous Data Sciences. Today we have two panelists, and I'll briefly introduce both of them. Kevin Lee. Kevin has been working as an executive in pharma industry. He has assumed several leadership roles in his tenure of over 20 plus years. Um, Kevin is a data scientist, Python enthusiastic. He's very passionate about machine learning and deep learning, large language models. He's really a role model of how you could, whom you should look at when it comes to adaptation of new technologies and tools. So it is very much honor and pride to have you here, Sunil. Welcome to the panel. And we have second panelist, Sunil Gupta. And those of you who are in pharma industry do not need introduction of Sunil because there is a very high probability that you learned something from Sunil in your career in pharma industry. So Sunil has been also assuming a lot of leadership roles in his long tenure in pharma industry. And notably, Sunil is very much involved into training in the SAS and R. Um, Most of you must have heard Gupta programming. That's Sunil's venture, and he also moved on with training R. So he's R guru as well. So welcome, Sunil. It's really honor and privilege to have you here.
Thank you, Parag, for inviting us here for this panel discussion. Thank you.
Yep.
So
Thanks, Brock.
this, thanks. So this is very informal discussion. We are talking about open source technologies, how they are getting adopted in pharma world, and what roadblocks we see. So it's really informal. You are welcome to pose your questions in chat. What we're gonna do, we will have some content discussed, and then we'll take a pause to see if you have any questions to discuss, and we will have further content to discuss and go ahead. One thing before we start, I just wanted to make sure there is a clear understanding of this podcast being uh, for information purpose only, and the views are expressed here are all personal opinions of the panelist and moderator and do not necessarily represent the views of the organizations we all are or have been affiliated with in past. So take this as a information sharing only, and if you need a professional advice or consultation, you can always reach out to the panelist or us as moderator. Okay, so the slides are just to guide. Not necessarily we are having a training session here to walk through the slides, but we'll just talk with reference of some of these slides. So for instance, when we talk about the open source, what exactly we mean by open source? I would direct the question to Kevin first. Uh, Kevin, how we see the open source? Is it like connotation is it free? I mean, open source is free.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that open source means that let's say you do have some applications, and then open source mean for application is that the source code that actually create that application is open to public. In many cases, a lot of application is built by enterprise. It's not open source because it is kind of proprietary IP. So they don't really open that how they build applications. But when they say open source means that when you build that application itself could be open, has a source, but it is open to the public. So people can take a look at how they build that application with that source data.
So Sunil, when we say you can see the source code, what's the benefit of us seeing the source code? Like if we are using the application, how it benefits us to see the source code or have access to source code?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. When you think of open source, I mean, obviously, people can be confused about it, just like myself. I was confused initially. As Kevin says, adding on to that, when I think of open source, I'm thinking of community software. So what that means is, as Kevin mentioned, the source code is available for anybody to see. In contrast to what generally has been done in organizations where development has been done in-house and the program resides. But open source, meaning that the 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 course or the source program, the logic is available, but then you have to know what to do with it. How do you going to
Mm-hmm.
interpret it? Are you going to directly apply? Are you going to test it? Are you going to, does it how does it fit into your organization? So you need to be careful on how exactly you're going to use it, because you want to make sure that it's used appropriately and just not accept every open source that's there. So be very careful on how what you do with open source, how exactly you're going to be using it. And obviously there's many benefits to it. With it being open source, somebody has gone through the extent of developing. There's some purpose, maybe filling a niche,
Mm-hmm.
some utility that can be fully utilized, and
Mhm.
shared with others. And one of the key things that is an advantage of that is latest in statistical modeling, and statisticians will mention that.
I see, I see. So, if I get access to open source application, as if I'm an analyst, or to be specific, if I'm a programmer who is doing coding in certain technology, and if I get access to another technology, what to do with it? I mean, how does it benefit me to have access to open source technology? I mean, any one of you can.
Yeah. So let's say that we using the team as our meetings, and let's say this Microsoft team is open source, which means that Sunil actually could build the team himself, which means
Oh,
that whatever technology is out there, it is open source, which means that uh, I could build it, Sunil could build it, and then Parag could build it. So, which means we share the same technology in public.
I
So
see, I
that's what I
see.
mean by open source.
Okay.
Yeah, and to add on to that, one of the things that I see as far as key benefits, I think organizations need to take a look at two approaches. One is very target purpose. R is gaining traction, obviously, in the pharmaceutical industry. So what can R do? Obviously, there's many things that R can do as far as being consistent with what SaaS has been doing, for decades. But really, another real benefit or enhancement is extending what R can do. And
Hmm.
Shiny apps are getting a lot of publicity, a lot of attraction, because then you can go beyond just doing base R programming into extending it to more shiny apps, and that's a real advantage. The other thing is long-term goals. What's going on as far as benefits with the R? You have Farmiverse. That really opens up a whole new world of things that can be done that hasn't been done before, with the collaboration that's going on, and just not just doing the base R and the common R
Mhm.
packages, but the packages that are developed from a Farmiverse, that really extends to what people in our industry can do, much more than just doing individually.
I see, I
Hmm.
see. So, if I do SaaS coding, for instance, and to do one particular data processing, if I can use different techniques within SaaS, why should I look into R or other technologies? Like, for example, if I want to do the transposition, I can use proc transpose, or I can use the IML modeling, and there are various techniques within SaaS itself I can explore. What's the advantage of me learning R or Python or anything else to do the same data processing, because the underlying data processing hasn't changed?
Hmm. Hmm.
anything that you think that should make me feel like, no, I have to learn it? Is it because industry is taking it forward? I have to learn it.
Well, I think it is important to see what's going on with the industry, because what happens is if you're working for a CRO, then you have a sponsor requirements that you need to adhere to, and if the sponsor is getting gravitating towards R, you can't really ignore it. I think it's a matter of time where they will be integrating R as part of the workflow process. They could be bringing in R as QC, QC type role. So that's something as a CRO, as a sponsor. They may be looking at, resource issues, resource constraints, because you have a pool of, talented R programmers coming out from industry, and
Hmm.
those would be, readily available. That could be some issues, challenges that they're working forward to. And then, pharmaceutical industries, they want to do the collaboration, and so I think there is going to be more, and we're obviously seeing it, this year. This year seems to be a very big turning point. So I think, there are good reasons to be opening yourself to learning R, not just restricting to doing everything, in SAS, for example, but lowering and being open, to R and other ways of doing things, because you'd be interested to see what you find, and can do with R.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, one question for
Mhm.
you specifically pertaining to the small to mid-size sponsor pharma companies. Um, they want to implement R, they want to implement other technologies, but they are really hesitant to go in that direction because, you know, um, they are the ecosystem in SaaS is so readily available, right? So, what do you feel like, what's the roadblock or what challenges they face and what decision factors they have to adapt to R or other open source technologies based on your experiences?
Yeah. So let me kind of give you one example that I did for about a couple years ago. And actually, I was leading that so-called migration from
Mm.
SaaS to the open source program for one major pharma company. It is not the biometric department, but it was actually the commercial analytic department. The main reason that, oh yeah, actually this is a kind of huge department. It's about there are about 150 actually SaaS programmers, and then the company decided to completely teach the SaaS, and then they're going to move into open source like R and Python. There was a kind of enterprise level decisions for that one department. Is just kind of making sure it's not a biometric, it is a commercial
Mhm.
analytics. So the main reason that they are moving away from SaaS to open source is actually cost,
Oh,
because
yeah.
usually the license for the SaaS is about $10,000, but when they convert into the open source, I think it costs about like $1,000 basically. So they were able to reduce in terms of license perspectives about almost like 90%. Of course, there's other costs get involved, like open source R. They're using the R Studio as a platform, so they need to get license for that one, also implementation. So there's other costs involved, but in terms of license perspectives, the cost could reduce dramatically. So there was a kind of cost base decision by that one major big pharma company. And then we could kind of see that a lot in many pharma at this moment. A lot of commercial analytic teams or data scientist team actually moving away, or moving from SaaS to that R and open source programmings. And then, but there's also kind of concern, but I don't think that it will happen for biometrics because we are more heavily kind of regulated
Mhm.
in the FDA. And then the FDA, or even the FDA say that they know about R or Python, but I believe, well, consensus is that they feel more comfortable with the SAS. So when we actually submit that the package, either data package or like STT Atom data package, we also include that the SAS. I think we should also include the code for the Atom package. So Um, it's better to going with the SaaS at this moment, but in terms of other function rather than biometrics, we kind of see the trends that actually a lot of organization uh, implementing R or Python more than SAS nowadays. So that is more about enterprise level in terms of benefit perspectives. And then individual kind of like us, like you who used to be SAS programmer, and then kind of want to know more about the other programs, is that usually in a lot of things, SAS, R, Python, they're very similar to each other's. I mean, there is a SAS in better in a certain area, and R is better. I think SAS probably better in terms of data manipulations, and R is much better in graph. As kind of
Mhm.
Sunil mentioned, the R Shiny is probably the best tool right now. And then Python is much better in machine learning. So, but in the core kind of data manipulation or data processing, R, SAS, Python is very similar to each other's. So in the individual perspectives, the benefit actually learn about open source programming is that you actually broaden your skill set. The SAS is a good tool. You could do pretty much everything to SAS, but at the same time, R and Python is a good tool too. Having more tools or more, skill set in your part, then I don't think it's gonna harm anybody. It's gonna probably benefit the most of the programmer knowing about the R and Python. I mean, one example that I have is that we actually help that 150 SAS programmers, and then now their actually job title is not SAS programmer. Their job title is actually data scientist, and they like
Mhm.
that title much better than SAS programmer, because data scientists kind of known to do other program as well too. But if you kind
Yeah.
of say, if you kind of say that I'm a SAS programmer, which means that you only know about the SAS. So
Yes. Yeah.
in terms of kind of personal, skill set perspectives, and actually, the people prefer call as a data scientist who could do
Okay.
SAS, R, Python, SQL for other things as well too.
Okay.
That's kind of my 2 cents on that one.
Okay. Sure. So besides the cost, anything else you feel like what propels a need for open source when it comes to the mid-size pharma or the CRO or vendors?
Yeah. One thing that kind of mid-size and then also small size vendor is that um, nowadays, I think that a lot of people probably kind of know, and I think year 2000, 23 is a starting point about, Gen AI, large language model, or ChatGPT. And 2024, it become much bigger concept. And we kind of know that it's going to change pretty much everything that we're going to do for the next 5, 10 years. And then, but in order to implement Gen AIs, actually Python is the best way to do it. SAS, I think you have to buy extra license to do machine learning, and R is a good, but in terms of infrastructure perspectives and then public kind of consensus is that Python is much better tool. Python is most common tool. I'm not going to say much better. Python is most common tool to develop and deploy that machine learning model, including Gen AI. So for small and then mid-sized company is that whether kind of big company, a lot of time that uh, it's slow to adapt new technologies. There are a lot more layers they need to go through. But small and then mid-sized companies that they have a much faster kind of process. So in
Mhm.
order to, and then they're more open to that new technology. So uh, implementation in terms of new technology such as ChatGPT or Gen AI. And then I think that Python on open source is going to be much better suited to actually adapt than using those kind of new technologies, because it is open source, which
Mhm.
means that you don't need to wait until new version of enterprise is available, you could just take whatever is out there, you could use it right away because it's open
Right.
source. It is kind of community driven, not by the enterprise. That is a reason that I recommend that mid-sized small company to implement open source program because they could adapt the new technology much faster.
Okay. Are they having a fear that they are the first one to adapt and fail?
Yes, that is correct. Maybe this kind of beyond about open source, but when you talk about like a ChatGPT or Gen AI, people have two fears. One fear is about missing out opportunity, and then a second fear about messing up.
Mhm.
So that is kind of common to all new technology, even for R and Python. Let's say that we are implement R programming in for submissions.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're doing that, but at the same time you have a fear that what if this R code we send to the FDA not gonna get approved? That's kind of same
Right.
questions. We don't want to be missing out the new technology, but we also do not want to messing up the current process. So that
Right.
is kind of
Right.
trade up all the times. But in terms of kind of small and mid-sized company, they're much open to challenges, open to new technology. So, that might be the reason that I think that probably implementing open source could be a good way to adapt new technology and quickly adapting, quickly changing, quickly innovating, and so on.
Sure. Um, I'll take a quick break to see if anyone have any questions. Please put those in chat, and um, we can go through those questions briefly. So we have actually a few questions here. Yeah. We are talking from biometrics perspective. SaaS will be used for foreseeable future. How can open source complement existing SaaS-based applications programming in biometrics? How, so basically the question is, how can the other things complement to SaaS?
So, I mean, I think as one of the key things is not only just replacing what some things that SaaS can do with R, but what can R do better. So, for example, graphs.
Mm-hmm.
In the SaaS world, you have the graphical template language in R. Uh, and that's initially where R got its break from, because everybody said years ago that R is fantastic for graphs. And so once you take a close look at it, you realize it's completely designed for graphs, and it's the template concept. So there's no I mean, there's customized graphing, but the features there that within the graphs in R enables it to do the customization much easier than with what you have with SAS as far as the graphical template language. So that's one area where organizations can seriously look at, okay, maybe we can replace what we've been doing as far as customization of SAS graphs with using R. But of course, getting that point, you do need to learn basics of R.
Mm-hmm.
It's a foundation and the way it thinks, because it does think very, very differently.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thanks, Sunil. So there is another question about what's your view regarding possibility of making JSON or R compulsory for submission? So currently we have defined .xml, but what's your view about FDA might say tomorrow that JSON will be the by default compulsory format?
Um, well, I'll just add some comments. I mean, we're definitely hearing a lot about JSON. So obviously, there's a lot of buzz, and that could happen
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's important to take a look at what's going on with the industry, what because generally the decisions made, enable a better review, more information, more intelligent decision making process. So I think that does make sense, and that's the key thing about following the industry, what's going on. Don't be surprised. Be aware of what's all going on. Stay in tune with podcasts like this, and know the reasons why decisions are being made, and so that you can make the adoption. So I think that could make sense when that decision is being made.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. We have one more question. So, how can an AI or R or any open source support in the regulatory environment or tightly regulated environment we have? Should we reach out to FDA or any agency well before and get their approval before we start using these applications in real time? Again, it's just how you see things, like what's your opinion about it?
Yeah, maybe Kevin, you have some idea suggestions on that.
Yeah, I mean that's the kind of fear that most of the pharma company have, how that AI is gonna be or open source is gonna be viewed by FDA. And then I think that we have a kind of misconceptions about FDA. Actually, they are very open to it. And then we cannot using AI in such as kind of efficacy data point. Let's say our AI say that our drug is effective. You cannot do that. That is something that FDA do not want. Nobody don't want that way, because how can you trust AI in that matter? So that is something we're not able to do. But in terms of other kind of clinical operations, or data management, or in terms supply chains or drug discovery, AI is going to play very major role in those area. Biometric, it has a little impact, as much as we as much there's a little impact on the biometric. That's what I'm thinking at this moment. So SAS is going to be still main tool for biometrics, but you're going to see more kind of implementation. Let me give a couple of example. In the biometrics department, there are a couple of company actually developing protocol, SAP, or TMP, those kind of document, or CSR, those kind of documentation using Gen AI at this moment. At least they are doing that. They are trying to do those things. And then in terms of the data visualization, there are a couple of tools actually coming out that people don't need to code, but they can just asking simple questions, such as, tell me about the patient 001 as a text. And then you get a patient profile information, such as this patient is a demographic information, and then is a vital sign, a lab, and so on, things like that. So it's going to be coming up in terms of some of the data analysis, or kind of administrative work. Those things AI is going to be helpful. And another thing I could give you example is that, oh, I want to convert my SAS code to the R. AI could do that. It's not 100% accurate, but when I try with my ChatGPT, it's about 90% accurate. And or there's actually R Studio, and also I think the Project right now. Project working on this one, and also I remember that Databreak also working on this one right now. Is that you put the comments. There's a comment section in the code. You put the comments, and automatically the application with the comment, it actually create the R or Python and SAS code. So those things coming out. So you kind of notices that those Gen AI or AI gonna be really helpful, but in terms of kind of final efficacy, data point, and then creating that STM atom, actual code most likely will stay as a SAS, and some R and Python.
Just
So
to add on to that,
mhm.
oh, go,
No,
just
go
to add
ahead.
on. And just to add on to that, proof of concept has been there for our submissions, so that people should realize that. And the other thing is they're looking at adding, shiny apps with the submission, because then you can have more interaction with the data. It's not just a static review of the tables and listings, but more of interactability. So
Mhm.
Sure. One just very general question about what packages available in Python similar to what we see in SAS procedures. Are there any like equivalents that we see in Python that we can tap into and say, okay, if you do so and so in SAS, this is how it is done in Python?
Yeah, in the Python, there is the package called pandas. It is actually how to data manipulation for structured table like a data. So Panda is a one that is the most popular one. If you and then it has a pretty much all those functions like a sorting and then transpose, those kind of things is there, and merging, all those data preparation is gonna be theirs.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think we can move on with the next segment here, talking more about parameters to qualify open source technology. So this is something, as a user, I would just go with the organization that is taking the open source technology. But if I am a decision maker in a small scale organization, um, what parameters should I be looking at? Cost is one thing, obviously, but how do I determine that so and so application can be useful for my analytic needs? So kind of a pointers for due diligence process. Do you think of anything
Hmm.
apparent like, okay, this is how we can qualify things, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I think, when I think of this, I think in the days when I would do the installation, qualification, operational qualification of SaaS, when SaaS is being installed. So I think similar type of process needs to be done with R. Uh, and I think more so with R, because R, considering it being open source, you have versions, you have dependency. You don't have just one package. You have multiple packages for a variety of things, and so having tight control on version control. Which
Hmm.
packages actually get utilized, kind of reporting that. Um, the three kind of pillars along these lines, have to do with like accuracy, traceability, and reproducibility. I think those are important to see, how that fits into the organization as far as making sure that what they have in place for open source, meet those criteria, and monitoring that. Don't be so quick to get the latest versions of the packages.
Mhm.
Monitor what the users are doing, and if the users are creating new packages, has it gone through a rigorous amount of regression type testing. So these are important things to consider.
So are there any such companies or packages available to do this kind of services? Because when we say open source, it's open to community. So are there any specializations already happened for this kind
Yeah.
of?
Yeah, there is. So you probably, for example, a Taurus, they're leaders in this field. So they have what's called open val. I know for
Hmm.
companies that are very interested, they've gone through this exercise, and basically validated, hundreds of packages, what they think would be very useful for the pharmaceutical industry. So you can go that route and use that type of service. Of course, there'll be a fee for that, but there are avenues to do that if organizations don't have the knowledge, expertise, or the time, to do it, themselves.
I
Hmm.
see. When it comes to validation, I know we talk a lot about validated software being one of the regulatory requirement, not just from FDA but around the world. All regulatory bodies want the work need to be done on the validated software. What it means when we say validation of the software in a general terms, why it is a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal. From the very early stages, in our industry, we've done parallel programming, and that's because we want to independently come to the same conclusion based off of the same specification. And so validation is part of the SOP, exactly what we need to do. So when you're getting into R, that's a natural question as far as the validation. And so I think as people learn, have a better understanding of what it is that R has, as far as how can you do the documentation of what versions that you have. How can you control
Hmm.
the different packages that are being there? How can you test the results from the packages, whether you're doing any type of data management type of operations. but it has to be documented. It has to take time, and this is one of the key things that people need to be aware of. They just can't jump into R. They have to strategically plan for this. There's a steep learning curve. There's many things that had to be in place. You have to have coordination with IT, and then take a look at study timelines, and then allocate time to thoroughly validate. I think once you've set up a validated environment within your organization, then you could pretty much treat it just like a SaaS installment, because then you're confident that the packages, and I think using common packages, organizations can feel comfortable,
Right.
going with that approach.
Mhm.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Anything to add, Kevin, besides this on
Um,
validation space?
yeah, actually, I had a chance to work in other department, kind of commercial analytic or real world evidence department as well too. And their validation is a little bit different from the validation in the biometric department. For them, we are in that function, we are dealing about like 1 billion records. So when you talk about 1 billion records, then about, let's say about like thousands data is kind of not sure there's something wrong, but like 1,000 out of the 1 billions is kind of one, I think 0.1%, something like that. So
Mhm.
those kind of things ignore in terms of the validation by those big data. But in the biometrics, one data point sometimes make a difference in that efficacy or safety. Let's say that one patient die in your control arm. Oh, that's a big issue. But it was actually wrong coding, or it was done by open source program, so it actually got a wrong code in it by itself, so you got that kind of result. Or let's say that one because some of the kind of stat model we are using open source, yours actually p value is greater than 0.05, but in SAS p value is actually less than 0.05. So which means that there's some issue about open
Yeah.
source programming. So uh, in biometric or clinical trial development, one data point could actually make it or break it.
Yes. Okay.
So that is a reason that in clinical trial, validations and compliance become very, very important, because we are doing this in order to get our drug approved and help the patients. But one data point or two data point actually stop us because we are using open source,
Sure. Sure.
which is
Yeah.
not validated. That is a reason that validation become very important open source program, just making sure that we do our due diligence in FDA perspectives.
Right. Right. Oh, most of our viewers are familiar with the validation process, but still, I want to give a quick glimpse of here. When we talk about validation of application like SaaS, we think of it in three stages: installation qualification, operational qualification, and performance qualification.
Yep.
Now, each has its own goals to make sure that the software is performing properly, right?
Uh-huh.
And the most important from what I see is, installation and operational can be handled using your IT resources and tools. But if performance qualification, if it fails, that's where the big, issue happens. Like to your point, Kevin, if one record misses out, that can happen if the performance qualification is not done right.
Yep.
So when you look into the R, for instance, as an open source technology, or Python as open source technology, and it has like various packages, what have you seen from your experience? Is it the PQ or performance qualification, or do we have other issues with IQ, OQ as well with R and Python?
No, I haven't seen any IQ, OQ in either. Actually, when you talk about IQ, OQ, it is more about system.
System, yeah.
So yeah, so when you download either RStudio, maybe Jupyter notebook, and then I believe that that is already done in the lot of company at this moment. So IQ, OQ perspectives, it is fine, as far
I
as I
see.
know, because
I see. I see.
I work for the many company, and then they all approve downloading, the RStudio and then Jupyter Notebook. They have no issue about downloading, which means that they done, IQ already. PQ is actually depends on department.
Mm-hmm.
What they think about this tool, open source tool, is going to be uh, okay in terms of the performance perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
But another thing is that this RStudio and then Python. I mean, RStudio using the R program and Python using that. I mean, the Jupyter using the Python most of the time,
Mm-hmm.
which means that PQ perspective, you have to do PQ in R and Python as open source program. So that actually belong to that each department,
I see.
not by the IT department.
Okay. So is it possible for smaller enterprises to validate the R or Python by themselves by doing PQ testing, or is it too risky, from your opinion?
I think that as long as you're not using that some regulatory process, it's not too risky. You're not thinking about one data point is gonna be make the whole difference. So those part is okay.
I see.
Mhm.
Okay. I'll take a quick break here. If anybody has any questions, please start putting them in chat. Um, in the essence of time, we'll continue the discussion, but if the questions are posed here, we can always ask those questions to panelists. Um, Now, moving it further, I think you already answered it partly, but what exactly it means for us as, again, you mentioned about SAS programmer to data scientist is a big change of the title, and it shows your versatility beyond just being a SAS programmer. But how much we should be chasing these open source tools, because we have folks here who spend considerable time and energy, efforts in learning SAS, in applying the SAS concepts, and suddenly now out of nowhere, we are being told now learn R, learn Python, learn 10 different things. You sure you're telling us the right thing? So that's a natural tendency. I mean, I spend my time in SAS. Let me continue in SAS. That's easy. Or will I be forced to learn R or get excluded from the job market? I guess that's a more serious way to ask the question. What is that it means to us as individuals, whether we are professionals working in this industry or whether we are decision makers in small pharma, small biotech companies, or the vendor side? What exactly it means for us, in your opinion?
I think that's a good question. I've asked this myself, many years ago. I am not one of the early adapters of R, to be clear. I'm a big advocate of SAS. I really love it and all the things that can be done. But I guess what happened was I kind of opened my eyes to see what's all the buzz about. What exactly is going on, with R? Why are so many people excited about it? What's going to be in it for me. Obviously, learning a language is not easy, especially when you're used to doing some things for decades, and it's like why, why. But I think
Mhm,
the more that you think, okay, long term, people attending my training sessions, they consider themselves to be early adapters. They can see what's going on the next 2 to 5 years. They want to be ahead of the curve. They can see, you know, they can look into the details. Okay, why are so many people talking about it? They don't want to be left behind. They want to be also part of the discussion. They can learn a little bit about R, then they make the decisions themselves. Okay, I'm not ready for R right now because of my workload, my priorities are not there. Or they can say the opposite. They can say, oh, this is a good time, or I need to allocate time to learn about R the next 6 months, because they want to be able to engage with their coworkers, because they obviously see what's going on. They don't want to miss out, and so I think
Right.
people need to stay on top and be aware. And previously, before this trend with R, I consider myself continuous learning SaaS, with many things that can be done with SaaS. So whether it's macro programming or Proc Report, many things that they're there. So I think continuously learning is part of our nature, what we should continuously do to always improve, do better things. I mean, I still come across SaaS programmers that really haven't done a lot with metadata programming. And so I think, people should learn how to better improve themselves and provide better service, to their organizations.
Sure. Thanks, Sunil.
Mhm.
Anything to add, Kevin?
Um, I think that open source is another, tool that we can have. I don't think that SaaS is going away. Is a SaaS is a great tool. And if somebody asks me privately that do you like SaaS or like R Python in clinical trial development, I always said SaaS is the best tool than R and Python, because it's easier to use, and then I feel more comfortable using that one. So if you're gonna stay in the clinical trial development like STTM, ADAM, or TFL generation, I think that says for me now, it says probably do the best job.
Okay.
If
So
you
we
wanna
have a
go, yeah.
okay. So we have a question. So if we want to focus something beyond SaaS, should we be focusing on R or Python? I know the answer from each one of you, but still, I'm reading the question.
I guess for me, I don't know enough about Python to actually answer that question. I'm sure Kevin does, so he can do a better job evaluation.
Okay.
I think it depends, where you're gonna go. I'm more about AI and Gen AI, so I doing Python more than anything else at this moment. But that's kind of my preference.
Okay. Sure. So we have been talking about the challenges, resistance to learn new things, or rather leveraging what we already learned and applied in past. Um, Thinking of some positive sides of it, for me as a user, what are the opportunities when I see the open source applications and beyond SaaS and R, we are getting exposed to many other applications. For example, when we started looking into pharmacovigilance, they're using the Power BI. There, some of them are using Julia. I mean, there are a lot of other things that are that we get exposed to. So what are opportunities if we are open to learn those kind of things? What do you feel like are the opportunities for us as industry, us as individual, or us as an organization?
I think if as an individual, if you see gaps in the workflow process, or if you see a better way of doing things, and you understand how to actually implement it, and communicate that to your team and management, and if the team and management, are open to ideas, um, then I think there's an opportunity to kind of show that and present that case. And of course, you have to get support from management, whether it's installation of the software or allocating time. But I think, organizations that, see some initiative from programmers, from team members to want to contribute, I think they should recognize that and support these types of things to enhance that, because as we know in a programming field, you start off with programs, and then you see that okay, there's some utility behind it, so develop into macros and then extend that to applications. And so the broader user base that you can have, to serve a common function, it addresses challenges, and it helps reduce the time and efforts to get the desirable outcome. So
Sure. Thanks,
Mhm.
Sunil. Kevin, anything else to add here?
No, I think that Sunil put the nail on it.
Okay, okay,
Mhm.
sure. Yeah. So, for our audience, in this particular space, what would be the takeaway message from each one of you? Like, if you feel like this is one or two things that audience should take away from this podcast, that okay, if I am talking about open source or thinking about devoting my time in learning or experimenting or even contributing, uh, what should be, I mean, as an expert, what do you recommend us to take next step?
One of the things that I would encourage, definitely listening and learning from podcasts just such as this. Fuse has Wednesday webinars that are available, single day events, learning what's going on with the Farmerverse. Uh, Not necessarily to be overwhelmed, but just know that okay, there's more granularity going on. There's more development of going on with packages, and then I would also suggest take a look at links where there are shiny apps that you can just use and play around with. I think you'll see that this is kind of next level where what you can do as a SaaS programmer, getting into this field of shiny apps, because no longer you have to do things with code, but you can do things with a point and click, and that really and open up some ideas and things that further what you can do as a SaaS programmer. So, getting access to that with Shiny apps, will help you in that process.
Sure, sure, Sunil. Thanks. Kevin, anything to add?
No, I think that uh, yeah. By the way, if you the first thing I want to say is that don't be afraid. It's not that difficult. If you know about SAS, then learning R Python is a lot easier. I be frankly tell you that if you know SAS, then learning R Python is you are about like 3 times faster than normal people. So there is really less learning curves. And then if you want to learn about R, like contact our R guru, like a Sunil. By the way, Sunil, when is your next courses?
Oh, thanks. I'm teaching my UCSD class right now, but I'll have my next open R class in a couple of months. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so attend those kind of courses because uh actually when you want to know about the R programming in clinical trial domain area, and is that someone like Sunil actually could explain much better than general R courses because he talk in terms of uh you know the biometric department or in terms of SAS programmers. So it's much easier for you to learn. So try to attend those courses, and you'll be helpful.
Sure, thanks, Kevin. And I would say
Thanks,
the
Kevin.
same thing. If you wish to go to the route of Python, contact Kevin. um, so one question, I know Sunil, you have to drop
Yeah,
off, but I
I need to
just
leave.
had one question that I thought might be uh, brought to your attention, because this talks about, from user perspective. Let's say if somebody is trying to learn R, what commonly encountered challenges that the user faces when they are trying to learn R with the SAS background?
Yeah, one of the things that I personally encountered is I'm always trying to. Well, it's a good thing and bad thing. I'm comparing things to SAS. SAS was to me much easier to read and understand and apply. R is more of a technically based language. It uses a lot of the special characters, and so there's some meaning behind that as well. So learning, understanding that, things also is what to avoid in learning R. Like for example, I didn't need to go down the path of matrix, just focusing on data frames because that's working with data sets is what I know. Matrix is not something that I want to deal with, and also focusing only on the common packages, the tidyverse, dplyr. Those things enable me to do the things that I want to do: data input, data management, transpose, SQL type processing. So being focused, in the journey to learn R enabled me to really understand the foundation, the concepts, and then kind of to excel with it. So I'd recommend that.
Sure, sure. Thanks. Thank you, Sunil. And
Thank you. I just need to leave. Yep.
yeah,
Thank you.
feel free to stay. I mean, I know you, if you need to drop off, I think he, he just dropped off. Um, Kevin, I had one other point to be brought here.
Hmm.
Beyond the cost, lately I have learned something else that, the RAM required in grid computing by when you have multiple users, that is also kicking in as a factor in selection of different applications. Like when you say SAS versus R versus Python, how much resources it consume at the RAM level, because on operating platform space, as we are moving to cloud,
Hmm.
the pricing is going by token, not by user number of users or number of months as a duration for licensing term, but it's coming as a token. So the more RAM computing you are having, the more the more money you pay as a licensing, right?
Yep.
So
Hmm.
I'm hearing that there is a more and more consideration in that regard when you come up with open source tools like R and Python versus SAS. Have you seen that when you looked into these some of these applications?
Yeah, actually, that's the kind of good questions. Nowadays, a lot of time that when you, I mean, if you're gonna talk about just clinical trial data, we only talk about 3,000 at most patient. So
Hmm.
in terms of computing power, whether using the SAS or Python, it doesn't impact so much.
No, but if you think about the data lake or data warehouse based on the data accumulated from multiple trials, this could go exponentially big, right?
Yeah. So yeah, actually,
So,
that yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I was talk about that one. When you talk about big data, whether it's going to, let's say you want to analyze with the clinical trial data with the real world evidence data,
mhm,
then now you're talking about actually big data. And then in those cases, yes, the computing power and then also resource become very important. So um, in terms of the resource perspective, usually Python is the best way to do it.
I see.
I mean,
Okay.
SQL, probably SQL might be the better, but uh, it is more about how you actually structure or store your data. Whether you because a lot of time that what we notice is that, let's say you have a big data here, and then your company environments there. Importing the data from here to company environment costs a lot of money,
Yes.
and then also at the same time you have to have a two different server actually running your code. So nowadays industry trend is that you actually running your application in the same area, in the
Right.
where data resides. That is a kind of directions of the lot of company going, such as Snowflake or Databricks are the one actually using those kind of technology.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah.
so um so I mean, but SAS is not really tool they use. Either they're using SQL or
Yeah.
Python is a major tool that either Snowflake or Databricks using nowadays, because they want to running the big data and analyze it at the same server,
Right.
same
Right.
computing environment, rather than two different environments.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's exactly what we are witnessing. That um, lot of Snowflake along with R coding or even PL SQL coding, we are required to do that more as opposed to stay confined with traditional software applications. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think that's aligned to what we have been witnessing. So I think that's pretty much about this podcast. Thank you so much, Kevin, for your insight here, your time. We truly appreciate having you here. And
Oh,
they, yeah,
yeah. Can I make one announcement?
sure, sure,
S-
yeah.
Yeah, actually, I've been teaching Gen AI at the US and also the pharmacy. It's a half day trainings, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna talk about large language model, and Gen AI and also ChatGPT, and how to use those two in for biometrics department, and such as kind of prompt engineerings, and also introduction about ChatGPT and Copilot,
Mhm.
Microsoft Copilot, and also Google Gemini. And so if you want to learn more about that Gen AI or ChatGPT implementation biometrics department, please join my seminar, either US and also PharmaSoc.
Definitely. I think we can gather that information and send it to all attendees. Devdatta, maybe we can take that as an action for
Sure.
post
Yeah,
podcast follow-up messages, right?
of course,
And
of
yeah,
course.
logistically, so thank you, Kevin, for your time again.
Hmm.
And logistically, what's the next step that we're gonna do with this podcast recording? And Devdatta, you can share more detail on that.
Okay, sure. And this is the wrap up for this episode. So, which huge thanks to all of you out there for tuning in. And we hope you find this conversation with Parag, Kevin, and Sunil very insightful and engaging. So for this, you can revisit this episode to see any if you have missed something or so into our YouTube channel. And this episode has been recorded and it will be publicly available for a knowledge sharing session to Sumptuous Data Science YouTube channel by end of today. And it's not only this episode, there are lots of other publicly shareable knowledge there. So my request will be please go ahead, go check that channel. There are lots of other episodes of podcasts and webinars available. Utilize them for your knowledge sharing session and gathering session purpose. And also for to get more updates on our upcoming webinars and podcast series, please head over to our LinkedIn page and stay updated for our upcoming episodes of podcast or webinars, anything. So thank you once again for listening, and we will catch you up for next time. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thanks.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye.